Oh gosh, Rivals, unsurprisingly, has the exact same problem Overwatch did. Do you ever feel like you're doing fine and then someone hits you with some random stat and says you're awful? Not to mention the fact that they are ignoring your other better stats? Well, let's talk about why the marvelrivals scoreboard is absolutely meaningless and a trap for bad players who don't understand the game. marvelrivals scoreboard lists 8 different metrics. Before we move on to why this system of measuring player worth is not only inaccurate but unfeasible, and why the way players actually use it is even worse, let's address each of these numbers individually and why they are absolutely meaningless. Starting on the left, we have eliminations. This number, which is for whatever reason treated like the most important stat, literally just refers to how many people you dealt any amount of damage to before they died. If that sounds like a great thing to keep track of to you, keep this in mind. If you want to get the highest eliminations on your team, literally all you have to do is repeatedly tap everyone on the enemy team with damage over and over. If any of them happen to die, bam, there's an elimination. It doesn't matter if you dealt 2 damage or 200, you're going to get an elim for that. The scoreboard doesn't care. Now, skipping ahead a bit, on the flip side of this is damage, another stat people pretend is the most important. But again, this is easily manipulated. For this one, all you have to do is find the easiest target with the largest HP pool on the enemy team, like the Hulk for example, or Thor, or just any tank without a barrier works great, and spend the entire game shooting them. It doesn't matter that you are feeding the enemy Luna and Mantis massive amounts of ult charge, or that your damage isn't translating to any kills, you're still listed as the carry in the endgame scoreboard. So then, if both of these are easily manipulated and meaningless alone, doesn't that mean that together we're able to understand the match better then? Not really. If you really want to farm both these metrics without truly contributing to your team and escape the blame since you get great stats, here's all you have to do. Make sure you deal small amounts of damage to all players as often as possible, but focus your primary source of damage on that earlier stated, easy target, high HP pool character. So long as you're giving the other 5 players light taps on the shoulder every few seconds, your elims will probably keep pace with the rest of your team, and you can focus the rest of your firepower on farming damage off one of the tanks. Congratulations! You're now the most valuable player while systematically throwing the match. Why is this important, though? Because it shows that there is not a logical through line connecting these stats and actually benefiting your team. Overwatch had this exact problem, but they had one underused system that actually fixed this dilemma, but we'll save that for after we address the other stats. Next, let's address assists. Funnily enough, nobody ever talks about this stat for whatever reason, but in reality it's very akin to the elimination stat. Essentially, you just need to provide either debuffs or CC to whoever dies, or buffs to whichever of your teammates gets the finisher. This means that, again, all you really need to do is continuously throw out your buffs, debuffs, and CC toward wherever there is most likely to be an elimination, and you're guaranteed to stack these up. It's a bit less brain-dead than elims, but it's normally the same general principle, where your actual level of contribution doesn't matter, just that you were there at all. Let's move on to deaths. Deaths are, again, one of the most mentioned stats, and while I do think there is a tiny bit of merit to them, as deaths do indicate 2 important things, it's still baffling why it's considered so important. Said things indicated are how much ult charge you're giving the enemy team without giving any to your healers, as well as how often your team is waiting for you to push. While these are both important, they are both not exact measurements, as you can cause both of these problems without dying, as well as the fact that deaths, unlike the rest of these stats, do not have any implication toward contribution. While stats like damage and elims are easily manipulated and don't give an accurate look at what actually happened during the match, they do at least indicate some tiny amount of information about something resembling player contribution, even if inaccurately. Deaths have absolutely no indication about how much you're contributing to your team, and don't give an accurate measure toward how much you are hindering them. Maybe you're playing a fast character, so you get back to the fight quicker, or maybe you aren't dying at all, but you're still farming health packs instead of letting your healer get ult charge. Even more damning, however, is that sometimes you should be dying. Whether it's dying on the point to stall your opponent's progression, or throwing your body at the point in overtime because nobody else can touch in time, or even just committing fully to the fight to make sure your team has every ounce of value they can get for this critical fight, there are moments when you need to be willing to die for your team to succeed. But some players genuinely avoid these moments solely to preserve their KDA, which makes them look better on the scoreboard but actively hurts their team. No, this stat is awful, one of the worst. Let's move on to healing. Healing is very like damage in how it can be misinterpreted. Sure, healing your tank that's throwing himself into damage constantly is good for your team so he doesn't die, but supports who care to look around and give heals to smaller health pool characters like backline long-range damage players are incredibly valuable, even if the scoreboard favors the supports who don't do this. Healing is yet again an easily misinterpreted stat, and to go along with it, the way people treat it like it's the only meaningful stat on support is appalling. No, just because Strategist A has 200 healing more than Strategist B doesn't mean Strategist A did better. Strategist B might have way more assists and insanely more damage, but somehow most low-rank players still think any stat other than healing on a support is just meaningless or bad. Small tip, that's not even remotely how it works. If your support is finding other ways to contribute while still healing, even if it's a bit less than your healbot teammate, that support is doing a great job. Healbotting is not the answer, friends. It's just one facet of supporting. Hey, just really quick, it would mean the world to me if you'd subscribed and liked the video. Genuinely. Okay, that's it. Let's keep going. Moving on, we have Final Blows. This is an interesting one, something Overwatch never included on their scoreboard, and I can see the merit of knowing who finished off their elims, but again, this is not telling the whole story. If someone happens to do the majority of the damage, only to have their elim finished off by someone else, that player is left in the dust, with only an elim and damage to show for it. And we already addressed why both of those stats are awful. You could argue it's only when combining all three of these stats that we can understand anything, but do you actually have a formula that can make any sense beyond a guess? Even if you did, there's no way for that formula to differentiate between a situation where you almost completely won a 1v1 that swung a fight, only for it to be finished off by a stray bullet from a teammate, and you shooting Thor on cooldown. The scoreboard can't do this. Next on our list is damage blocked. If Overwatch is any indication, nobody on the planet cares about this stat. While I do think it's silly that it's treated any worse than damage or elims or any other stat, it's true that this stat is, again, terrible. There is a massive difference, for example, between the Groot that just throws up walls every second and blocks damage with each of them, and the Groot who makes chokes incredibly difficult for enemies and defends key angles for his team. Just because the first Groot gets more damage blocked doesn't mean he's any better. Wasting your walls or damage reduction at meaningless times is throwing, not carrying, but the scoreboard can't see the difference. Last and honestly least, we have accuracy. I literally don't know why I even need to talk about this one, but here, I'll just say this. If you aren't constantly shooting walls, the floor, spawn, your teammates, everything, then you're a psychopath and you need to be put on a watch list. That's all. So where do we go from here? Well, we need to address the way people look at the scoreboard and why it's harmful to the game. Players often cite the scoreboard when things are going wrong, but they use it in such baffling ways. Oh, our tank is 0 and 4, no wonder we're losing. Let's quickly put aside the fact that 90% of people quoting stats on the scoreboard are literally ignoring the majority of the few stats that are even there, but let's think about this instead. Perhaps your tank is just making as much space as he can, and the only reason it's not leading to any kills is that your damage players are on some other planet having a 1v1. It's great that your Spider-Man is 2 and 0 right now, but he's only killed the enemy Namor twice, and hasn't actually done anything else beyond swing back to spawn or hide in a corner. Just because one of these players' KDAs is better doesn't even remotely explain the whole picture to what's going on. Even if this isn't your favorite example, there are infinite examples where the scoreboard is absolutely unusable for the only thing anyone actually uses it for, trying to understand player worth and thus blame a teammate for their loss. Nothing about this scoreboard can actually help you understand what is happening during a match accurately, unless someone is very obviously lagging or just mentally AFK. And the way players even use the scoreboard is even worse given they ignore the majority of it. None of these stats are any good, and just because you leave out half of them when you blame someone doesn't mean those stats are trash, it just means you're using different trash stats with even less comprehension. The only system that has ever done a good job of accurately measuring player worth in a game of this style is in Overwatch. Yes, you heard me right, but it's not what you're thinking. Unless you've seen my Fire Meter video, but in that case you could tell from the very start where this video was going. Overwatch 1's Fire Meter was the best score-like tool there was in a game like this, and yet Blizzard changed it to be worse, and still to this day hasn't put it on the scoreboard, despite my pleas. If you want to understand why the fire system was perfect for this kind of thing, you should go and watch that video for the actual details. But if you're too lazy, I'll summarize it like this. The fire meter is not easily manipulated by things that don't benefit your team, like Rivals' scoreboard is, and the fire meter actually adds the different ways players contribute together so that you don't have to pretend you can do that math for yourself on the fly. If you want to dispute either of those claims, no, you're wrong. Again, go watch that video. The fire system wasn't nearly perfect, but it was really, really good. I hate that I have to say this again, but if Marvel Rivals wants to foster a healthier community with a better understanding of stats and how to improve, they need their own fire system, and it needs to be on the scoreboard. If Rivals wants yet another leg up on Overwatch in this race, this would be an awesome addition. In the meantime, if you are ever wondering why you lost your match, don't look at the scoreboard for all the answers. Sure, it can help a bit, but it's not going to tell you the truth. Thank you so much for watching this. It always makes me happy to be able to talk with you about all this kind of stuff. Your sweet comments really make my day, all the time. Please like and subscribe, join the Discord if you're up for it, and hit the join button on my channel if you want to help us out a bunch, so we can get more in-person footage of openq instead of long distance. Thank you to Cammie and James for your help, and thank you all so much, friends, for being here. I hope you have a good one.